Hi there, and thank you for stopping by. We really appreciate you giving our little channel a chance. Now sit back and enjoy. Gulliver's Travels into Several Remote Nations of the World by Jonathan Swift. Part 2. A Voyage to Brobdingnag. Chapter 2. A description of the farmer's daughter. The author carried to Market Town and then to the metropolis. The particulars of his journey. My mistress had a daughter of 9 years old, a child of cowardly parts of her age, very dexterous at her needle and skillful in dressing her baby. Her mother and she contrived to fit up the baby's cradle for me against night. The cradle was put into a small drawer of a cabinet, and the drawer placed upon a hanging shelf for fear of the rats. This was my bed all the time I stayed with those people, though made more convenient by degree as I begged to learn their language and make my wants known. This young girl was so handy that after I had once or twice pulled off my clothes before her, she was able to dress and undress me, though I never gave her that trouble when she would let me do it either myself. She made me 7 shirts and some other linen of as fine cloth as could be got, which indeed was coarser than a sackcloth, and these she constantly washed for me with her own hands. She was likewise my schoolmistress to teach me the language. When I pointed to anything, she told me the name of it in her own language, so that in the few days I was able to call for whatever I had a mind to. She was very good-natured, and not above 40 feet high, being little for her age. She gave me the name of Gridric, which the family took up, and afterwards the whole kingdom. The word imported what in Latin called nanuculus, the Italians hominus latino, and in English mankind. To her I chiefly owe my preservation in that country. She never parted while I was there. I called her my Glumdalclich, or little nurse, and should be guilty of great ingratitude if I omit this honorable mention of her care and affection toward me, which I hardly wish it lay in my power to requite as she deserves, instead of being the innocent but unhappy instrument of her disgrace, as I have too much reason to fear. It now began to be known and talked of the neighborhood that my master had found a strange animal in the field, about the bigness of a splunknock, but exactly shaped and very part like a human creature, which it likewise imitated in all its actions, seemed to speak in a little language of its own, and had already learned several words of theirs, went erect upon 2 legs, was tame and gentle, would come when it was called, do whatever it was bid, had the finest slim in the world, and a complexion fairer than the nobleman's daughter of 3 years old. Another farmer, who lived hard by and was a particular friend of my master, came on a visit on purpose to inquire into the truth of this story. I was immediately produced and placed upon a table, where I walked as I was commanded, drew my hunger, put it up against, made a reverence to my master's guest, asked him in his own language how he did, and told him he was welcome, just as my little nurse had instructed me. This man, who was old and dim-sighted, put on his spectacles to behold me better, at which I could not forbear laughing very hardly, for his eyes appeared like the full moon shining into a chamber of 2 windows. Our people, who discovered the cause of my mirth, bore me company in laughing, at which the old fellow was fool enough to be angry and out of countenance. He had the character of a great miser, and, to my misfortune, he well deserved it, by the cursed advice he gave my master to show me as a sight upon the market day in the next town, which was half an hour riding, about 22 miles from our house. I guessed there was some mischief when I observed my master and his friend whispering together, sometimes pointing at me, and my fears made me fancy that I overheard and understood of their words. But the next morning, Glumdalclich, my little nurse, told me the whole matter, which she had cunningly picked out from her mother. The poor girl laid me on the bosom, and fell weeping with some shame and grief. She apprehended some mischief would happen to me from rude vulgar folks, who might squeeze me to death. or break one of my limbs by taking me into their hands. She had also observed how modest I was in my nature, how nicely I regarded my honor, and what an indignity I should conceive it to be exposed for money as a public spectacle to the meanest of the people. She said her papa and mama had promised that Grildrig should be hers, but now she found they meant to serve her as they did last year, when they pretended to give her a lamb, and yet, as soon as it was fed, sold it to a butcher. For my own part, I may truly affirm that I was less concerned than my nurse. I had strong hope, which never left me, that I should one day recover my liberty, and as to the ignominy of being carried about for a monster, I considered myself to be a perfect stranger in the country, and that such misfortune could never be charged upon me as a reproach, if ever should return to England, since the King of Great Britain himself, in my condition, must have undergone the same distress. My master, pursuant to the advice of his friend, carried me in a box the next market day to the neighborhood town, and took along with him his little daughter, my nurse, upon a pillion behind him. The box was closed on every side, with a little door for me to go in and out, and a few gimlet holes to let in the air. The girl had been so careful as to put the quilt of her baby's bed onto it for me to lay down on. However, I was terribly shaken and discomposed in this journey, though it was but a half an hour, for the horse went about 40 feet at very step and trotted so high that the agitation was equal to the raising and falling of a ship in a great storm, but much more frequent. Our journey was somewhat further than from London to St. Albans. My master alighted at an inn which he used so frequently, and after consulting a while with the innkeeper and making some necessary preparation, he hired the grutter or carrier to give notice through the town of a strange creature to be seen at the sign of the Green Eagle, not so big as a splungnut, an animal in that country very fine-shaped, about 6 feet long, and in a very part of the body resembling human creature, could speak several words and perform 100 diverting tricks. I was placed upon a table in the largest room in the inn, which might be near 300 feet square. My little nurse stood on a low stool close to the table to take care of me and direct what should I do. My master, to avoid crowd, would suffer only 30 people at a time to see me. I walked about the table as the girl commanded. She asked me questions as far as she knew my understanding of the language reached, and I answered them as loud as I could. I turned about several times to the company, paid my humble respects, said they were welcome, and used the same other speech I had been taught. I took up a tumble filled with liquor Glumdalich gave me for a cup and drank their health. I drew out my hunger and flourished with it after the manner of fencing in England. My nurse gave me part of a straw, which I exercised as a pipe, having learned in the art of my youth. It was that day shown to 12 sets of company, and as often forced to act over again the same fopperies, till I was half dead with weariness and vexation. For those who had seen me made such wonderful reports that the people were ready to break down the doors to come in. My master, for his own interest, would not suffer anyone to touch me except my nurse, and to prevent danger, benches were set around the table at such distance as put me out of everybody's reach. However, an unlucky schoolboy aimed the hazelnut direct at my head, which very narrowly missed me. Otherwise, it came with so much violence that it would have been infallibly knocked out my brains, for it was almost as large as a pumpkin. But I had the satisfaction to see the young rogue being well beaten and turned out of the room. My master gave public notice that he would show me again the next market day, and in the meantime he prepared convenient vehicle for me, which he had reason enough to do, for I was so tired with my first journey, and with entertaining company of 8 hours together, that I could hardly stand upon my legs or speak a word. It was at least 3 days before I recovered my strength, and that I might have no rest at home. All the neighboring gentlemen from 100 miles around, hearing of my fame, came to see me at my master's house. There could not be fewer than 30 persons with their wives and children, for the country is very populous. And my master demanded the rate of full room whenever he showed me at home, although it were only to a single family, so that for some time I had but little ease every day of the week, except Wednesday, which is their Sabbath, although I was not carried to the town. My master, finding how profitable I was like to be, resolves to carry me to the most considerable cities of his kingdom. Having therefore provided himself with all things necessary for a long journey, and settled his affairs at home, he took leave of his wife, and upon the 17th of August, 1703, about 2 months after my arrival, we set out for the metropolis, situated near the middle of the empire, and about 3,000 miles distant from our house. My master made his daughter Glindamich ride behind him, carried me on her lap in a box tied about her waist. The girl had lined it on all sides with the softest cloth she could get, well quilted underneath, furnished it with her baby bed, provided me with linen and other necessaries, and made everything as convenient as she could. We had no other company but the boy of the house, who rode after us with the luggage. My master's design was to show me in all the towns by the way, and to step out of the road for 50 or 100 miles to any village or person of quality house where he might expect customs. We made easy journey of not above 7 or 8 score miles a day, for Glindlich, on purpose to spare me, complained she was tired with the trot of the horse. She often took me out of the box, at my own desire, to give me air and show me the country, but always held me fast by the leading string. We passed over 5 or 6 rivers, many degrees broader and deeper than the Nile, and there was hardly a rivulet so small as the Thames at London's bridge. We were 10 weeks in our journey, and I was shown in 80 large towns, beside many villages and private families. On the 26th of October, we arrived at the metropolis, called in their language Lobrugrod, or Pride of the Universe. My master took a lodging in the principal street of the city, not far from the royal palace, and put out bills in the usual form, containing an exact description of my person and parts. He hired a large room between 300 and 400 feet wide. He provided a table 60 feet in diameter, upon which I was to act my part, and I was put around 3 feet from the edge, and as many high to prevent me falling over. I was shown 10 times a day, to the wonder and satisfaction of all people. I could not speak the language tolerably well, and perfectly understood every word that was spoken to me. Besides, I had learned their alphabet and could make a shift to explain sentences here and there, for Glindlich had been my instructor while we were at home and at the leisure hours during our journey. She carried little book in her pocket, not much larger than Sanson's atlases. It was a common treatise for the use of young girls, giving a short account of their religion. Out of this she taught me my letters and interpreted the words.